I don't know if you realize that the beginning of Matthew's Gospel is the most boring page of the Bible. That's why we almost never read the first chapter of Matthew's. It's really long and boring, 17 verses. It starts like that. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, Jacob begat etc., etc., etc. Remember? 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 generations from David to Babylonian exile, and 14 generations from Babylonian exile to Joseph, the husband of Mary. Plenty of strange sounding names, boring reading. It was cut out from the lectionary because who can stand 14 times 3, 42 strange sounding names? Who begat whom? But there was a point why Matthew begins his gospel in that strange and boring way. You see, unlike Luke or John, Matthew is writing his gospel to Christians of Jewish heritage. He is trying to convince the Jews that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament, of the Hebrew Scriptures' prophecies. So on each step, Matthew will quote the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, and Matthew will make a point to show, you see, Jesus has been foretold a long time ago. That's why he's making this long and boring genealogy from Abraham to David, from David all the way to Joseph, Mary's husband. Matthew says Jesus had a valid claim to the throne of David. Jesus is David's direct descendant. That's why the boring first page of Matthew's Gospel. So today's Gospel passage skips those 17 boring verses. Today's Matthew's passage starts with verse 18 of chapter 1. And from verse 18 and following, Matthew makes a different claim. Matthew says, despite of all that I just said in verse 1 through 17, Jesus was born of a virgin. Jesus was not Joseph's biological son. So hold on. Why do you bother to create 42 boring names to say that Joseph is descendant of David, and then you say, by the way, Joseph wasn't Jesus' biological father? Why bother, right? It sounds like there is no purpose, no sense in his logic. On one hand, he is going out of his way to trace the genealogical tree from Abraham, David to Joseph. And then once he gets to Joseph, he axes him off and says, no, Mary was a virgin. Mary as a virgin has become a big part of Christian and Catholic theology. Even when we speak of Mary, we say, Blessed Virgin Mary, right? Every time we speak of Mary, we have to insert that virginity claim right there. And Matthew is the first one who makes the claim, right after his boring, long genealogy in chapter 1. Why is Matthew making Mary a virgin? Of course, in many other religious Middle Eastern mythological stories, almost all the gods or semi-gods are born of virgins. So it is a part of Middle Eastern ways of writing a fascinating story. Perhaps Matthew is employing the genre to not stand out too much from other God-like stories. But perhaps there is another reason. I think what Matthew wants to say is that on one hand, our lives can be carefully designed and planned. On one hand, we can have this perfect design for our lives. I will go to college, I will get married, I will have a child or two, I will save enough for retirement, I will go cruising once every other year. And this perfect package labeled my life has been prepared for us, by us. Just like Jesus' genealogy in the first 17 verses of Matthew's Gospel. And I guess it is important to have that plan. It is important to have that design for your life. There is nothing wrong with that. But be ready, because God can make a virgin have a child. Be ready for surprises in your life. Plan your life, design your future the way you want it. But don't be surprised if God steps in and God says, surprise, you had your plan and here is my plan. You know, 14 years ago, on December 18th, 2002, I was ordained a priest. I can't believe it's been 14 years now. But 14 years ago, as Bishop Leibrecht was laying his hands on my head, I had a plan. I had a vision for my priesthood. And suffice to say, excommunication wasn't a part of it. Suffice to say, being a priest at St. Stanislaus in St. Louis wasn't a part of my plan. I was supposed to go and finish my doctor's degree in canon law. I was supposed to work in the bishop's office, climb the ladder, maybe have a small parish in the suburbs of Springfield, Missouri. This was my plan. This was my carefully designed schedule for Father Bozek's life. But God stepped in, and a virgin became a mother, and my life was turned upside down. And out of the sudden, here I am, 14 years later. And like Joseph and like Mary, I have to make sense of my life. Just like you, we all have to make sense of our lives. Not always do they follow this carefully designed plan for ourselves. Not always the lines go straight from point A to point B to point Z. It's okay to have that nicely written plan. It's okay to have that first 17 verses of Matthew's Gospel. It's fine if you know what you want from your life. Try to achieve it. But be ready. Because, to quote the Gospel again, on a day you know not, God will step in. And God will put his finger in your life and turn your life upside down and direct you where you don't want to go, and will make you do things you never thought you are capable of doing things. Be ready for miracles in your life. Be ready for virgin births. Be ready for surprises. For at the end, Matthew says, God's name is Emmanuel, God with us. And because He is with us, God will do as God pleases. Amen.